and this is Community Forum. We have with us an exemplary person, Mr. Sedrik Newbern. He's the president of Phoenix Insurance and Financial Services Incorporated, an all-state insurance agency in downtown Libertyville, Illinois. He's president and founder of Newbern Consulting Group, specializing in marketing, consulting, relationship coaching, and motivational speaking. Recently, authored a book entitled Unconditional Forgiveness, Lessons on Letting Go to Build Better Relationships. We also have Mrs. Tyra Thomas, co-host for Community Forum. She's an educator, and she's a founder of Prep School Academy, and we have time left in the program. We'll let her talk about her academy.
I think we have enough to talk about with Mr. Newbern. It won't be any time today.
Mr. Newbern is a native of Nashville, Tennessee. He holds a BS in marketing from Western Kentucky University and an MBA with a concentration in economics from Tennessee State University. Greetings, folks. Mr. Newbern, I'd like to start off with you. I'd like for you to tell our listening audience, and our listening audience is approximately 100,000 people in the Comcast viewing audience, but the program also airs in Cook County on CAN TV. It airs in Kenosha, Time Warner, and in about 5 or 6 different agencies here in Lake County. So I want you to tell them a little bit about your personal and professional background. Who is Mr. Newbern that I haven't talked about?
Well, I think you nailed most of it. I have been affiliated with Allstate, and I say affiliated because I started off my career in marketing with Allstate in 1999 in Nashville. Prior to that, I spent 5 years in the nonprofit world, raising money and supporting young people. I oversaw a teen program that I helped to launch and celebrated 20 years this past year, and moved on to Allstate doing marketing in the Nashville area, got promoted, moved to the DC area, then came here to Chicago, which is the home office for Allstate, and shortly after getting here realized it was time for me to go out on my own and start my own business, and so I purchased an Allstate agency that's in downtown Libertyville. So my background's a little weird. Most people are surprised that someone in marketing would first go into fundraising and nonprofit world, but there's a lot that I learned in the nonprofit world that enabled me to be successful at all corporate levels in marketing with Allstate, and then now as a small business owner. So a lot can be said for those that go into the nonprofit world, because you basically have to make things happen with nothing. And you really have to tell a story, so it's not as easy to come by the funding and the support.
Now, did you have a supportive family to encourage you to go into the field?
Great question. Yes, I did actually. My mother is my biggest fan. My mother is my PR publicist, you name it. She's always been that for me.
Okay.
And she definitely encouraged me to pursue higher education and pursue a successful career. There was a turning point, which you're probably alluding to because of conversations we had previously. When it was time for me to make the jump to owning my own business, my mom got a little nervous about that. It was very uncomfortable for her, and she, because as mothers would do, she didn't want to see me fail. And at the time that I probably needed the biggest cheerleader that I had to support me and push me along and cheer me on, she was a little less supportive. She was like, "Are you sure you want to leave this good paying job?"
Because she wanted you to have security.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this was before all of the Affordable Care Act and the changes in healthcare. She was very much concerned about health insurance for me. And but obviously, here we are 4.5 years later. The agency is doing well, and the consulting business is doing well as also. So I think she feels okay that I made the right choice
decision
at this point.
So do you think that you want into being an entrepreneur because of your MBA, of your background in business? Is that kind of what made you want to go into being an entrepreneur?
Actually, my desire to be I've always dabbled in trying to do something for myself for as long as I can remember. I just was always afraid.
That's a big step.
It's a huge step.
Big step.
And especially when you don't when you don't have a support system around you of entrepreneurs, people that are willing to take those steps, or better yet, to sit down with you and talk to you about the process of taking those steps. It was a little scarier for me. I wish now, knowing what I know now, I wish I had done it when I first came out of college, because there's no telling where I would be today, because you know, the ideas that I had and the excitement that I had about life, you know, some of that does get jaded when you go into corporate America and you have to kind of fit into the cog, and you've got to try to force that square peg into a round hole.
But the history, I'm sorry, the experience you received with your nonprofit, believe me, helped build you. So you didn't really miss any time. You may have taken a different route.
Absolutely.
But those building steps will be in place for where you're going.
Oh, absolutely.
I was looking at your book, and then we can come back to this. I don't know if they can get a shot of this, but when I first looked at the first thing I saw first was your gorgeous son, but I thought of Pursuit of Happiness.
Yes.
Has anyone ever said that to you?
Yes, absolutely.
That's what I see.
Why? Because I look like Will Smith?
Of course. No, you look better than Will Smith. You look much better than Will Smith. But I mean, it's the father's son.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
yes, Will Smith and his real son.
Absolutely.
So when I saw that and you guys were going out to the water, I have an aunt and she always says that peace is in the water.
Absolutely.
And I see you and your son, and does that look peaceful?
Very much.
It's so much just peace.
Well,
so that's what I
the
see.
interesting thing that I don't talk about, and you just reminded me of it, the gentleman that wrote the story, Pursuit of Happiness, I actually had an opportunity to meet him through Allstate. I shook his hand, and at the time, I was contemplating writing the book.
Wow.
And I spoke to him briefly about, you know, enjoying the movie. And the first thing he said was, you need to get the book and you need to read the book.
Yes.
And once you read the book, then you appreciate it, because that's a movie, that's Hollywood.
Amen.
And it's funny that you bring this up,
There
because
it is.
now, yes.
It's truly Pursuit of Happiness.
Absolutely.
The two of you.
And I remember that story touching me in a great way, and it does parallel quite a bit to my story and some of the relationship that I'm trying to have with my own son.
So would you mind giving us a little background on the title of the book is Unconditional Forgiveness, Lessons on Letting Go to Build Better Relationships.
Yes.
Before you even start, I think the titles of your chapters are riveting. Where do we begin? Don't let your pain be your child's burden. Oh my Lord. Mom, it's not your fault. How could it be your fault, maybe?
Yes.
Money can't buy love.
Yes.
I don't owe you anything. I think my son thinks that. Godfathers impact more than just their own kids.
Good fathers.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yes,
good
good
fathers.
fathers.
I think of Dr. Brooks always as a godfather, so when I saw that, I'm sorry. I want to be like my daddy.
Yes.
To forgive, you have to forget. Amen. I just want to mention these chapters because they're so, oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Are you my daddy?
That's a poem that I wrote.
All right, we got to talk about that one.
Yes.
A father's love helps define a child. Lord have mercy. Son, I want to always be your superhero.
This sounds like a part one,
Do
two,
you
three, and
hear
four.
all these chapters? I mean, no one reads this book in more. It takes you a day because you can't put it down. I don't care enough to let you back in. Lord have mercy. I'm going to stop there because
let me
it's
help
just
you.
riveting. Go ahead. I mean, just pick a chapter. It doesn't matter. Pick one.
Right.
So the background of the book is this, and I'll start with my story. Really, my story begins with my parents. So my parents met in college at Tennessee State University, and it was Judy and Pedro, and everywhere Judy was, Pedro was there, and vice versa. So they were college sweethearts. They got married right after college, moved to Washington, D.C. My dad was trying to get one of those good government jobs, as they like to say, in architecture.
Security.
And he was trying to get a good government job, and they were there for a couple of years when they had me. Things were very difficult because you're talking 1971. Things weren't great in this country. They had just left the South and had experienced a lot of the challenges that we saw in the movie on Selma just recently. And so they're now in this big city from small town Tennessee trying to make a life with a brand new baby. 9 months after I was born, my dad dropped me and my mom off right about Father's Day weekend at my grandparents' house, and he moved to Los Angeles. And that was the end of their marriage.
Did she know she wasn't going to see him again, or?
Yeah, that was it. Yeah. I met my dad at age 5, and he flew out. The awesome thing was my dad's parents, my paternal grandparents, especially my grandfather, which I write about in the book, loved me. And actually, Dr. Brooks reminds me a lot of him, which I've not told you that, but you remind me of my granddad in just mannerisms, even the voice.
But you don't mind sharing him, do you?
Yeah.
No, but you know, I am jealous about that. Okay.
We'll talk about that.
That's okay.
But so because that relationship was so solid, I spent time with my paternal grandparents who lived, believe it or not, 21 miles from my maternal grandparents.
Okay.
And so summers and holidays, I would always get to see both sets of my grandparents. So my dad came back to visit when I was 5. That was the first time I actually met him. And then after that, he started to send for me to come and visit during the summers or Christmas. And at age 18, I was a grown man. I was a freshman at college, and I was out there for the Christmas break.
Okay.
I'm
in
a
California.
grown man. Yes,
Okay.
I'm a grown man.
I keep hearing that
at
part.
18.
At 18. I was going to let that go, but
Grown
I'm
man.
glad you're
at
stressing that
18.
because I was getting ready to address
Yes,
that. But
yes,
go ahead.
I was fully grown.
Okay.
And it was one evening, my dad had remarried, and unfortunately that relationship didn't last. And he had my sister and brother from the second marriage. So the kids were in the back room sleep. Finally, I could have some time with my dad so I could sit down and talk to him about grown man stuff. And it was in that conversation that I said to my dad, I forgive you for leaving and not being there for me as I grew up. And he did. He showed it. He did come back from a high school graduation, but a lot of the things that young men need in terms of relationships with the father, those just were not really in place. And it's difficult because if you're in Nashville and he's in Los Angeles, it's very difficult.
Sure.
So we had that conversation, and I said, Dad, I forgive you. And it was in that moment I literally saw 18 years of guilt lift off of his shoulders. He forgave himself in that moment. And because of that moment, we then had a much more realistic and more solid relationship as men, because at age 18, I was man enough to tell my dad, hey, forget that. I have, what you did then, it impacted me, yes, but I don't hold that against you. I could understand why you may have made the choice that you made, but let's start from today and build a relationship. So then fast forward, I got married young, not too long after college, ended up divorced, married for less than 5 years, married again. The young lady that I married.
To right now.
Yes.
Okay.
You messed up the punchline. That's okay. So she and I get married. We get moved to the Washington, D.C. area right after we got married, just like my parents. 2 years later, we were at the hospital having our son, Matthew. 9 months after Matthew was born, I was on a flight being relocated here to Chicago. And my son and wife were still in Virginia. And it was literally throughout the course of the pregnancy and especially that flight that I decided I wanted to write a story. I wanted to write a book about that experience because I was terrified when we were trying to get pregnant, trying to conceive. I was excited, but then the second they said you're pregnant, I flipped out. I didn't know what to do. Could I be a father? I don't know anything about being a father. My mom did remarry, but she remarried when I went to high school. Great relationship with my stepdad, but the formative years, the first 13 years of my life, I grew up without a dad in the home. And so I was really worried about it. And it was on that flight that I actually had thoughts of the conversations I'd had with my father, the men that had mentored me, the guys who I ended up pledging the same fraternity that had been in my life since I was a little bitty boy, that taught me what it meant to be a good father, a good husband, a leader in the community, a business owner, you name it. They all had set just the perfect example for me. And that was when I had confidence literally on that flight that I'm going to be okay. I'm going to break the cycle. I'm not going to, again, have another child grow up without his father in his life. So it was in that moment that I decided to write the book. And so the title, believe it or not, comes from a conversation I had with my dad about forgiveness and the challenge that we have with forgiveness, that it's not unconditional.
It originated with your relationship with your dad.
Yes.
Okay, because it went a whole lot further.
Yes,
I'm not going to comment, but
it
grew from there.
It did.
Okay.
Well, and if you notice, the book is actually divided into 2 sections.
Yes.
The first half talks about my relationship or children's relationships with their fathers. And so I have some very direct conversations for single moms and some of the challenges that they may be faced with. whether it's the pain that keeps them from allowing their children to have a relationship with the child's father, or if it's the father who's just being no good or a jerk. How do you let that go and still allow that child to grow and develop without having hatred toward that father? And then the second half of the book is really just about relationships in general, because we all carry baggage. We all protect our heart, so to speak. But what we do is when we protect our heart, we don't allow other people into our heart.
That's true.
And so the damage that we carry, we then pass along, not only from relationship to relationship, but from generation to generation, because our children see the pain that we go through. Our children see the barriers that we set up. And then ultimately, they end up repeating some of those same cycles.
You said after the hope is gone. So is the hope gone that you allude to here, that you mentioned here, is the hope gone before you reconnect with your dad? Is the hope gone?
Well, that was that chapter was more about relationships. But a lot of times what happens,
Okay,
I think
that makes sense to me.
Yeah,
then.
people, we go into everything full of hope, full of excitement for what's going to be. And then all of a sudden, reality sets in.
Yes.
Something changes, the direction goes, things go in a different direction. What do you do once the hope is gone? What do you do? How do you pick up the pieces and start over again? How do you change the course of your life and the direction that you're going in after hope is gone? And actually, when you read that chapter, you'll see I kind of played off of, because this was all around the time of Obama's election, and there was a lot of talk about hope. And it just hit me that a lot of us have hope shattered very quickly in life. And so how do we rebuild from that?
I think that, and then I'm going to give this to Dr. Brooks over here. Men, I think women, as a woman, we don't realize how deep men can love their children, okay? Because you buy into what the public says, especially about minority men and diverse men, that they leave, they make the babies, but they don't raise the babies. Okay. So when I see a man, and I've met a couple men who may not be with their children, but they miss those kids, and they want a relationship with them. One of the way I met Dr. Brooks, I worked for his daughter for like 3 years in her school, and in her office, she has this picture. A huge picture of her father, her mother, and she, and all of them are PhDs. Okay. How often you see that in a black family? I'm sorry, and I come from a professional family, but there's no 3 degrees or generations in my family, okay? And the love that she had announced for her father, I thought, oh my God, I wasn't that close to my dad. I wish I was. And when I look at this, I'd see, you're saying the unforgiveness that you asked your father to give you at 13, which to me, 18, that's painful, the 13 years of that. I'm sure he had pain. I'm sure you had some pain, okay? Yes. But again, I think a lot of women, we don't think that guys have that.
Well, it's interesting you should say that. So Dr. Brooks knows that I do a radio show, and my guest today was a young man, Dante Bland, whose father was murdered when he was a year old. And Dante loved his dad, and Dad was a great man. Because his father was not with him, Dante is what I would call, I call mother hovers, moms that hover over their children. And I said, we've got to come up with a father hover too, because Dante is very much involved in his children's life, just like I am. I think there is, unfortunately, society has told us that as men, we are not supposed to be that involved or that engaged. As men, we're naturally born to be providers and to provide security and income and shelter and all of those things. And what happens when the father and mother split, well, now my natural tendency of providing for you in terms of shelter, food, and other things that, as the hunter, those are no longer necessities, so to speak. And especially when you throw in the other dynamics of child support and you're not paying your fair share, or I'm paying my share and more, but you're not letting me see them. All of those things get played out, unfortunately, in our community, more so than the men who truly play an active role in their children's lives, those fathers that pay more than their fair share of child support, that spend more than just the every other weekend and once a week visitation process. Those dads, unfortunately, do not get the limelight that they should. And not to mention, there's so many men or so many children that have grown up in two-parent households. Yes. The statistics say that half of the children grow up in single-parent households. Well, that means the other half grow up in a dual-parent household.
Exactly.
So why not focus more on getting those men who have made the commitment to go back and mentor the young people that are growing up in a house without a man, and then maybe we can solve some of the challenges that we have in society and get more people off of drugs, out of jail, and through school so that they can be contributing people in society.
And that comes in your chapter with good fathers impact more than just their kids.
Absolutely.
No, I may be an exception to the rule because my father left the home when I was 2 years old. And I never hated him, and with my kids, we always went to see him and give him whatever, love or whatever. But with all the biblical principles that I learned and going to church with my mother taking me, leading me there, say something is wrong. If I ever get married, then my life will be the reverse.
Right.
Well, I didn't have a book to tell me how to be a father, right? But I've been successful 56 years of marriage.
Wow.
With no book.
Yes.
And three youngsters that she mentioned are college graduates and great in their professions, and they're still nothing but love, So it can work.
Yes.
And like you do coaching and so forth, and you could, mentor the kids that there is hope.
Yes,
absolutely. But you call this journey to forgiveness, and you have a 2 in here.
Yes.
What's significant about the 2?
Well, there's a little thing called domain names. I've been talking a lot about journey being of forgiveness, and I usually sign the book and say, continue blessings to you on your journey of forgiveness. And I decided I wanted to do this workshop series, and I wanted to get a URL or a domain name that would actually be simple for people to find, because as you know, my name is not easy to spell. And so sending people to my website directly is usually not the best course. So I literally went to GoDaddy and found, and I was like, this is really about a journey to forgiveness. And the truth is, forgiveness, when you do reach that state of forgiveness, it doesn't end there, because even though I've forgiven my dad and he's forgiven himself, we still have moments where you're just reminded of bad things, or you go back to a place that is not a happy place. So that's why I say it's a continuous journey for people. So I wish there was a significant story behind the number 2, but it truly was just availability of that domain name. But it really put together for me what I believe forgiveness is all about, that it is a journey, and that if people will start the journey of forgiveness, whether it's forgiveness of themselves, and I do believe that there are 3 steps to forgiveness. First, you have to forgive yourself, because if somebody hurts you, what's your first inclination? How in the world did I let this happen to me?
That's true.
That's the first thing you're going to say, no matter what happened. If it's sexual abuse, whether it's divorce, whatever it is, your immediate reaction is going to be, I'm smarter than this. How did I not see this coming?
That's true.
So I challenge you first to forgive yourself. Once you've forgiven yourself, then you can find ways to then forgive the other person that has hurt you. You may never get the words I'm sorry out of that person, but it's important that you let it go for yourself.
Yes.
Because what I've found more often than not, and you guys I know will agree, you could be upset that somebody hurt you and be down in the dumps for years, and that person has moved on, they've lived their lives, and in many cases they don't even know that you're upset with them. They have no idea.
Right.
So and there are a lot of quotes out there about the fact that forgiveness really frees a prisoner, and the prisoner is you. So once you realize that you forgive yourself, you forgive the other person, then you have to let it go. I remember when I was going through my divorce, I was just trying to find information to inspire me, to motivate me, because I was really, really disappointed with myself and marriage ending and so forth. And I remember hearing this story about a guy who was in line at the grocery store. It was just an interesting conversation I was having. But he's in line at the grocery store, and he has, let's say, a pack of gum and a soda. And I didn't say pop because I'm not originally from here, by the way. But he has a soda and a pack of gum, and there's a lady in front of him with a basket full of groceries. And he's not paying attention. He's kind of thumbing through the magazines. So when it's his turn, he goes up to the cashier. He hands his gum and his soda, and the cashier says, that'll be $215. And he's like, for a pack of gum and soda? And the cashier said, yes, because you're having to pay for the person that came before you. And that hit me so hard because I realized a lot of times in relationships, we pay for the person that came before you.
That's true.
So when you've been through a divorce, you've got a lot of pain.
Yes.
When you get into that next relationship, the first time that person says something or does something that reminds you of something that was unpleasant,
Flashback. That's true.
you have a flashback.
That's true.
You immediately, whoo, whoa, whoa. And then the person you're with now then pays the penalty because the person that did it is gone. So you can't pay them back.
That's true.
So you take out that pain on that other person. So the third step is letting it go, because you've got to realize that if you don't let it go, you're going to continue to pay the next person in line.
And it could continue to repeat itself if
Absolutely.
you allow it to happen.
Absolutely.
But your book, what made you write this book? I mean, what drove you to the point where you felt you were compelled to write this?
Well, there was a lot going on in my life at that time. I was making the decision to leave corporate America.
Okay.
I had just had my son, and I was kind of reflecting on the fears that I was having during the pregnancy. It still took me another couple of years from the day he was born until the date that the book was published. And so I was reflecting on all of that, and I said, you know, as I look around myself and all of my buddies, all the guys that I grew up around, all of us have turned out to be successful in our own right. We've all done well, and the majority of us grew up in single-parent households. And I said, you know, and the ones that have children are very much involved in those children's lives. They're very much involved in the community. They're doing everything they can to make the world a better place for other young people. And so that's when I said, we've got to talk about this. And I'm tired of all the stories about male bashing.
Yes.
You know, this book was not about, and when you read it, as nervous as my dad was, and as nervous as he still gets when I do TV shows and radio shows,
He's wondering how he's going to be projected, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, Dad, you know, I mean, and we're the best of friends now, but when people talk about these things, it tends to be from a negative place.
Yes.
This is not negative. This is about giving people the tools that they need so that they can be better parents. For the moms, they can be a better mother to their children if they realize that their child needs a father. They need that influence. And I know I'll get backlash because every time I say this, people get upset. It's not possible for a woman to be the mother and the father to anybody's child. Right. That's impossible. Yes, you take on the role, but there are certain key things in a child's life that a father plays in terms of the role. As a young lady, that's the first man they fall in love with. That's the man that they learn how to be treated by. That's the man that teaches them how to be treated. And then for young men, they also model how they treat other women based on how their fathers treat their mother. And so as a mom, and especially a single mom, you can't play both of those roles. It's difficult. It's impossible. Now, that's not to say I'm not taking, my disclaimer, I'm not taking anything away, mothers, I'm not taking anything away, because there's so many of you that unfortunately are forced to take on both roles. But for those key things, find a man in the church, in the community, Boys and Girls Club, wherever, that can help fulfill some of those other intangible pieces. You know, I talk in the book, and I tell my wife all the time when it comes to certain things with my son. So, you know, my uncle taught me how to ride a bike. My grandfather taught me how to tie a tie. One of my fraternity brothers in college taught me how to shave with a razor.
What fraternity were you in?
Kappa Alpha Psi.
Oh, very good.
Kappa
very good.
Alpha
Okay, we
Psi.
can move forward. We're in a good line now. My husband's a Kappa. Just want to get that out there.
All right.
Okay, until the day they die.
You
Okay.
know, that's always touchy. You never know.
I know. I'm good.
Why did he pass the alphas? No, I mean, not that I'm not alpha.
No, but my father's an alpha. I don't know, but you know. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, since we're speaking of fraternities, my stepfather's an alpha, and my father is an omega.
Oh Lord, so you got the whole gambit.
So you can imagine, you know, not only did I talk about forgiveness, forgiving my father when I was 18, that following spring when I got back to college, I pledged Kappa.
Okay.
And also in that conversation while I was there that week, I should say, I told my dad that I was going to pledge Kappa. And it was after we had this conversation about forgiveness and the relationship we had. He said, "Oh Lord, I definitely failed my child because he was about to pledge Kappa instead of Omega." But you know, the fraternity, a lot of the guys in the fraternity that were around, they were friends of my mother's when I was a kid. They were co-workers with my mother. I write about J.T. Smith, who owns a barbershop in Nashville. He and his son and I were best friends. We sat down beside each other first day of first grade, and we were friends all the way. And I would go to his barbershop after school, and JT taught me about discipline and loving everybody, because there were some characters, which I write about in the book, some characters that strolled up and down Jefferson Street in Nashville, and JT treated every single person the exact same way.
Wow.
JT got on the floor and played with his kids, and he loved his kids, and there were so many days. He was like Cliff Huxtable. And I was like, this is the dad that I want in my life, and this is the dad I want to be. Now, I will admit I'm a little bit older, so playing with a 7-year-old on the floor isn't as easy as it would have been if I had done it in my 20s or 30s.
Young.
But
I crave for a daddy. I crave for a father in the home, but I never did get it. My mother played both roles.
yes.
Until she passed away at 90.
That's a her.
She was a dominant role in my life.
That's a her.
That's awesome.
You know, all the way through college. She's right there on the college campus, you know, and every, so for the mothers, you know, that are,
Yes.
you know,
yes, you know what I'm saying.
they're playing a definite role there, and you don't have to have. No, I shouldn't say it. And I won't go that way. You know, They don't have to have the man in the house.
But no, but I
he
do
should be
think
there.
Yes.
But I do.
I
I still. I miss so much. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and again,
And I recover.
I because of the book, I end up talking a lot about my father. But the truth is, I wouldn't be where I am today if it were not for my mom. My mom,
Right.
she sacrificed so much to make sure that my life was amazing. She put me through a Catholic school, as we talked about earlier, where she had to pay tuition.
I know.
I was literally 3 blocks from her work. She worked at Meharry Medical College.
Really?
Yes.
I was going to say that your mother was a professional. I wanted to get that in there.
Yes,
For
yes.
you, Mom, I got your back. I know you're talking about the dads, but I noticed that your mom,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
she was a single mom, but she set a very good example
Absolutely.
for you. And she
When-
set that bar pretty high.
When we went back to Tennessee, my grandfather, old school, you are not going to stay here. We are not going to raise that child for you. You got to get out of this house and get on with your life. That was what he told her. And because he said that, she moved back to Nashville. She started and completed her master's degree. She worked at Meharry. And her story, she tells me all the time, she stayed in that role at Meharry because she could take off whenever she needed to. If there was something happening at the school, she could be there in a second. So she sacrificed so much so that I could have a much better life. And then she decided, I was out of college, and she decided to go back and get her PhD, and she's now a professor at Tennessee State, and she's been doing that for
Great.
20 almost 20 years now.
That is
And she's
fabulous.
loving life, and she really did. She set the example for me from the standpoint of education and commitment to community. So my mom and my paternal grandfather, which I can't, every time I look at Dr. Brooks, I'm like, man, whew. But WP
I'll
sitting over
tell you
there.
it's a compliment. All right?
Yeah,
It is a
absolutely,
compliment. It
absolutely.
is.
And the two of them drugged me all over town doing things in the community. I was at voter registration drives. My mom's a Delta, and so spent a
woman,
lot of
good
time
woman.
doing all those things in the community. And my grandfather would, every Sunday after church, there was this little old lady that lived in a nursing home down in Jackson, Tennessee, and she dipped snuff.
Oh, my Lord. Okay.
And so we would always have to go pick up a little can of snuff and go, and I would sit there, and I'm 7 years old, and it would drive me up a wall, but you know, I learned from both of those guys how important it was to give back and to help other people, and the smiles that they got, or the happiness they got from putting smiles on other people's faces. And I joke, I think it's so funny now, I've been gone from Nashville for 9 years. I have so many friends to this day. If I post any picture of my mom on social media, tell Mama Judy I said hi.
Oh,
I mean,
wow.
she's developed deeper relationships with some of my friends and people that she doesn't even know I'm friends with. There was a Delta event recently, and someone took a picture with my mom, and posted the picture and tagged me in the picture. And I had no idea that they even knew each other. And my mom didn't know that I've known this young lady for probably 20 years.
Oh, my goodness.
But amazing woman. She sacrificed so that I could be here today. And so everything that I do, I know is a reflection of what she did as a mom, what she's doing now, even as a grandmother. And I really want to make sure that
Are you the
everything I
only
do-
child your mom has?
Absolutely, only child my mom
So
has.
you grew up really a single child for 13 years or so, to your
Absolutely.
dad. So do you think your mother embraced a sense of positiveness with you in that your view with your father? Because, sometimes women, we can be negative.
Yes.
To raise our children against their fathers,
Right.
And we say we allegedly say we don't do it on purpose, but we say negative things in front of these children, so it kind of presets or prejudices their mindset.
Absolutely.
So how did your mother discuss your father when he wasn't there?
There's a chapter specifically on that topic. My mom did an incredible job. She never talked bad about my dad.
Okay.
Now, I can't say the same for uncles and, and other people that knew my dad, but when it came to my dad, my mom never talked negatively of him until I was old enough to process and understand. So
Yes.
I was a teenager before she let me in on some of the things that hadn't happened for the first, 12 years of my life. That, and at that point, I had a relationship with him, so I actually became defensive. I was defending my dad. I'm like, why are you saying these mean things about him? He's been awesome. And she's like, no, he didn't do this. He hadn't done this. And if he had done this, then things would be this way. And I said to her, again, 13 years old, I said, Mom, it's the past.
You said that at 13?
We can't change that. Absolutely. Absolutely. There were several moments between age 13 and 18 when it came to my dad where I had the conversation with my mom. It's the past. Let it go.
That is very mature of a 13-year-old.
Yes.
Because there are
I
people
had no
at
idea what I was
50
doing at that time. I wish I could say.
But you said the
Yes.
right thing. But even at 50, there are people who just can't let it go. And I mean, I literally, I have an aunt, honest to God, she's 92 years old. And she's still upset that her father didn't marry her mother. And he married her siblings' mother. And her dad didn't marry, and she is 92, and she will carry that to her grave. She has, I'm going to send her your book, because she cannot, and like you're saying, if you let it go, those 3 steps, you can move forward and you can grow.
You can absolutely grow.
She is 92 years old, she hasn't grown.
So when you spoke at Rotary a few weeks ago,
Yes.
and I tell my audience, this is a person that you should know. And this is literally a very meanness, and they see now by watching the show. But you talk to us about the rearview mirror.
Yes.
You you guys are all
Look at that.
excited about that. You want to
Absolutely.
just enlighten the audience.
Sure. So, I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, so you always have some very visual analogies about life.
Okay.
And I remember one that stuck in my mind, and it's been in my heart forever. And it talks about the rearview mirror.
Okay.
If you think about life the way that you drive your car, imagine you've got a windshield and you've got a very small rearview mirror.
Okay.
If you lived your life looking in your rearview mirror,
You have an accident.
driving down the road every single day, you're going to have accidents.
Yep.
Okay.
You're going to run into obstacles. You're going to miss your turn. You're going to, unfortunately, cause more harm to yourself and everyone around you. However, if you focus on the windshield and not on the rearview mirror, you'll be safe. If you use your rearview mirror just as a reflective tool to make sure that you've passed the obstacles in your life, you use the rearview mirror basically, again, just to remind you of where you've been. But when you look at them, even in size, the windshield is so much larger. The rearview mirror is a small fraction of the size of the windshield. And that's the way you should live your life.
So did you use the rearview mirror situation in terms of your new marriage now? Did you go into your new marriage saying, I'm not going to look back? I'm not, other than
well.
Boy, I'm glad I asked that question.
Yeah, why?
Well,
Why did you have her again? Why is she here? This is being recorded, so there's a chance. No, actually, my wife knows full well. I actually recently wrote a blog about how I found love again, because my wife and I were friends, and we had a discussion about love. And she had also gone through a divorce, and I was dead set against getting married again. Ironically, I'm telling her stories about girls I was dating and people I was interested in and attracted to, and this was like my sister. This was my best friend.
Wow.
And I just had a negative approach to life at that point. I was making other people pay for my groceries. And so she and I had a long talk about love, and I realized then that love is something that's achievable. It's attainable with the right person, with the right ingredients, when you really go into it with the right mindset. So to your point, or your question, when I first started dating my wife, we had gone from friends, and I was afraid to mess that up.
Okay.
I knew I was attracted to her, but I was afraid to mess up the
You
relationship.
keep taking these steps, like entrepreneur,
Yes,
love.
yes.
Okay.
And the story goes, I had a friend that was coming to visit me. She had a friend or guy that was trying to court her. And because she had moved to Chattanooga, so she was there by herself, I was worried about her safety, and I was like, well, you really shouldn't go out to dinner with this guy, because you just don't know who he is. We don't know anything about him. And lo and behold, she brings up the fact that I had a friend coming to visit me. And it was in that conversation that I realized at that moment that it was more to the story. It wasn't just about her safety. It was the concern that I was going to lose her. So when we went into this relationship, to your point, I was scared to death, because I went into it afraid that it could end, and that it could end up ruining one of the best friendships I'd ever had. And so, long story, I evolved, I grew, and she also has grown. And we laugh today. I mean, we still growing, because we'll be celebrating 10 years of marriage in May, and we're still, some days shocked that we're even together. Like, who would have thought that we'd still be married? This is amazing. How did this happen?
And still happy.
And still happy.
Okay.
And there are different degrees of happiness.
Absolutely.
Because I realize now that the facade of marriage that so many people live under,
yes,
it's just not true. I mean, my wife and I work together, so there's it's impossible for us to be happy with each other all day, every day. And I know that there are things that women deal with emotionally that we don't. Sometimes I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I love this interview. I really am having a good time.
That's why I'm doing the workshop.
I'm having so much fun with this interview. Thank you, Dr. Brooks.
There's some things that I've learned thanks to
that's going to make you change how you were going to say that, right?
Yes. But really, there's some things that women deal with emotionally that we never could understand as men. So now that I know that, and I realize I've kind of entered into that danger zone, like the threat level, the terrorism threat. When I know it's elevated to orange, I got to slow down and recognize that there's something else going on.
You need to write a book about that for men. Because I think most men don't realize they've entered that orange zone.
Yes.
Because if they realize it, because someone told me recently, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Men need to learn how to just be happy.
Yes.
You don't necessarily have to be right, because they enter that orange zone.
Right.
When is that book coming out? I want to buy that, a case of those.
Well, maybe I can put that. I'm actually working on a relationship book that I want to publish in the fall. So I know that there's a
orange zone.
The orange zone.
Yes, I like that.
Duly noted.
Well, tell us about the perfect gift that you wrote about.
The perfect gift. Well. That was a courtship poem that I wrote to my wife. It's at the very end.
Yeah, right.
It's at the very end.
Italicized, I might add.
Yes, it was a courtship poem that I wrote to my wife about our relationship, and it really speaks to how she was truly a gift to me. I didn't expect it. It came from nowhere, and how she truly changed my life because of who she was, and me, because of the relationship that we had going in. I approached it totally different. And I said to Dr. Brooks on his radio show, I was like, if I had met my wife, in my 20s, I would not have married her, let alone I probably wouldn't even dated her.
Really?
Because I was at a different place at that time. and I thought that there were certain things that I needed in a relationship and things I didn't want to deal with, that now I'm so glad that, you know, I laid on the blanket that day in the park and made the dumb comment, I'm never getting married again. Forget being in love. I'm going to be the old man at the end of the bar trying to pick up 20-year-old girls. I am so glad because of that dumb statement, the orange level statement I made.
Orange zone.
She really flipped everything that I had thought about life upside down, and it's been amazing ever since.
And you call her, she is the perfect gift.
She is the perfect gift.
I really think you should have brought her on this show today. I really can't wait to meet her. I'm going to make it a point.
We are all going to pray because my wife is, as she says, you do that.
Oh,
I don't do that. I don't do that. But my goal really is, because I think our story combined. So I don't talk a lot about her story, but she too came from a broken home and challenged relationships and so forth. And I think the two of us sitting down together with other couples, talking about how we have overcome some of our challenges, how we put things in perspective, I think would be absolutely powerful. So that's my prayer. And I'm putting it out there. So
I think that's why you're so good with your son, though.
Yes.
Okay, with both of you coming with both of those situations, make you. I think it makes you a great parent. I mean, you're a wonderful father and Dr. Daisy, but everyone doesn't have a Dr. Daisy and Dr. Brooks in their lives. They just don't. It's unfortunate. Unfortunately, there's more that don't.
Right.
So to hear a situation like yours, and I'm going to call this unconditional forgiveness, pursuit of happiness, this little boy is a very lucky young man.
Oh, thank you.
And he's going to turn out the next generation. You're going to see, it's just going to get growing.
It's amazing how we stay together because she's from a loving family, 8 kids, you know, and so forth. I'm the only child, broken home, you know, but we got together and worked it out.
Well,
I learned a lot from her. She learned a lot from me.
I know for a fact that I would be in big trouble if I didn't say this. My wife is an amazing mother. And she has taught me a lot about parenting because of how she handles, you know, situations with our son. And it's just, again, I can't say enough about how awesome she is. And it's not even a holiday coming up. So, so there's no need for me to suck up right now. But she's really helped me see a broader picture. And whenever I get off course, because I'm a guy, I can't help it. Whenever I get off course and I'm neglecting things that I need to take care of, she has a very gentle way of reminding me, hey, babe, you know, maybe it's time for you to spend a little more time with Matthew, because obviously this is my passion. My goal in life is to speak professionally and travel, write, and share my story and help other people come to a place of forgiveness and growth in their lives. And as you can imagine, I'm doing that, and I'm running an agency, and a million other things are coming at me. And there are days when I spend more time with the computer than I do with my family. And so she will put that back into perspective. And like today, I'll spend 3 hours chasing my son and his classmates around a gym, and I'll pay for it tomorrow with sore back, but in the end, it's about the time that I spent.
I know you walked in, you mentioned about your back, so I can see what happened now. But all day you mentioned you've been involved, and I guess this is a routine. I guess it's not a dull moment. You don't have a planned day.
No.
You just.
I think if I had one of those days or jobs or lives where I literally got up and every day I did the same thing at a certain, I would go nuts. For me to wake up, and literally my whole day can change from an email or a phone call.
Right.
Sounds like one of your days.
Yes.
Right.
So how do you remove the mask?
Ooh. Okay.
That's in here. I'm just
So
and it's in the section with the wife and the love. Okay.
Yes, it is. Because, and I talked about facade. So a lot of us put masks on, especially when we're dating. You know, I did an interview with a friend of mine the other day, and she talked about the first 90 days, how she does background checks and all kind of stuff on men before she commits herself to them. But what I talk about in that sense is that you've got a mask on when I first meet you.
That's true.
You're kind of put forward your best effort, or in some cases, you're reserved because you've been hurt. You don't want to give 100% of yourself because you don't want to get hurt again. And so, again, that's how do I remove the mask? How can I get you to let down your guards, to let go, and give me 100% of your unconditional love. And a lot of what I talk about, and she of course cracks up when I say this publicly, but some of those titles were from conversations with my wife Denise, where especially the one where it says, I don't care enough to let you back in.
Wow.
I was having a conversation with her, and I was like having a hard time writing, and I said, I just can't think of anything to write about. And her comment to me was, I just don't care enough about having a relationship with my dad. I just don't care enough about it to make, and it clicked. I was like, I don't care enough to let you back in. How many times do we just say, you know what, I don't care enough to let you back in my life? Whether it's a father, a loved one, in some cases children that disappoint us. So.
Exactly, and I think that sometimes parents, we don't even know how, I'm speaking on the other end, I don't think I've done this, but parents don't realize how much they've hurt their child, or how deep it is,
Right.
And sometimes it's not until a child is 18 or older,
Right.
and they start peeling back the skin, or they peel back the lemon or whatever.
Absolutely.
To let you know how deep it is. And you're like, well, I didn't know
Right.
you felt like that.
Absolutely.
And I know that I've been married twice as well. And my oldest son recently told me, he said, well, Mom, why did you get married the second time? Because we were together 10 years before I ever hit my second marriage. And I said, well, I wanted you to have a good role model. And he said, what makes you think you needed to do that? But I did feel,
Right.
and I agree with you, that I think boys, well, girls too, because I'm a
Yes.
girl, and my mother was divorced, okay? So I had that same thing happen. And I did have a hungering for my father. I used to say Sammy Davis and Bill Cosby were my dad in my mind, because I was searching for a father. So Bill Cosby was a good one, I liked him for my father.
Yes.
But even if kids don't say it, there is that hidden need. To have that, especially when you see other kids and your friends with
Yes.
their parents. And you say it's okay, like you're saying, I thought a mom could do it both, but we really can't. And ladies, I'm sorry to admit that.
Yes.
But they do need, there's a reason there's two. There's a reason God made Adam and Eve. There is a reason.
And not Adam and Steve. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's another show.
That's another show. Yeah, don't tweet me, Twitter me. That'll be Dr. Bruce.
Well, I want him to end up on, he gave to Rotary.
Oh, I wish
talk
I'd
about
gone to that one.
move on.
Okay. So talk about moving on. Moving on really starts with a mindset. It's how you see the world, how you see your life in general. If you don't have the right mindset going into life, it's going to be very difficult for you, no matter what you've been through, no matter where you're headed. It's going to be very difficult. You've got to overcome. You've got to overcome your past. You've got to overcome the things that happened to you. You've got to overcome those things that would hold you back. When it comes to validation, we do talk a lot about, or we validate ourselves with material things, or how other people see us. So we've got to check our validation. Expectations is also a challenge, because sometimes we set our expectations too high, or in some cases too low when it comes to people that we surround ourselves with. Ownership really boils down to you owning what role you've played in the mistakes that have happened in your life, because oftentimes we like to blame other people.
Yes.
So just like you don't want to forgive the other person, you also want to blame them for everything, and you can't do that. You've got to take ownership first and foremost. And then next, how can you change the destiny for the next person in line? So what can you do to empower your community, to empower young ladies, young men, for that matter, to change the perspective of your 90-plus-year-old auntie that is still angry and upset? And when you can change your mindset, you can overcome the past, you can look for validation that is truly worthy of you, and you can set expectations not only of yourself but of the people around you, and you can take ownership of the role that you've played, then you truly can move on, because then you will be able to set the trend and set the trajectory for the people that are next in line to follow you.
That's fabulous.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking with Mr. Sedrik Newbern. He's an exemplary person, as I mentioned at the top of the show, and a person that you should know.
Where can I get the book?
Oh,
Okay,
You need to let
right.
them
Thank
get
you
the
very
book.
much.
I'm sorry. I want to make sure they get this book.
Thank you.
I know our
Okay.
audience want to find out. Okay.
Yes. There's a few places. You can obviously go to my website, which I believe they've shown on the screen, sedriknewbern.com. It's also available on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. So if you go to amazon.com, you can pull up Unconditional Forgiveness. Look for the cover, and you'll see my book there, and it's available in print as well as to download on Kindle.
Okay. Now, are you self-published? I'm just curious.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, that's excellent.
Yes.
Tyra Thomas, our co-host, and Tyra, Mr. Sid.
I think you
you mentioned that. You
but
mentioned
I think you should do a
Mr.
second
Seaburn.
show.
We need a part 2.
I do. I
Oh,
really
really?
believe there's a lot we didn't cover
Yes.
in this book.
Right.
I do think every woman should get this, and every
Yes.
child. Every
Okay,
child needs to
okay.
have this book.
Mr.
Carry on
Newbern
with
is an entrepreneur. He's an author, and also, as you see, he's a motivational speaker.
Motivated me.
And when we have the part 2, Tyra, we want to make sure
Yes,
that
he's-
you're going to be here anyway.
Yes,
though, you
part
know.
2. There should be a part 2 to this. This is
Yeah,
enough
right,
on here.
right.
Seriously.
Yeah. Unconditional forgiveness, lessons on letting go to build better friendships.
Relationships.
Relationships.
Yes.
Make sure we get that relationships there.
yes.
So thank you very much, Tyra.
Thank you,
And
Dr.
Mr.
Gross.
Cedric,
Yes.
thank you very much.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Thank you. This
your
is
radio
wonderful.
program, is that a daily or
It's
weekly?
once a week on Tuesdays, but it's available on Blog Talk Radio.
Okay.
Blog
okay.
Talk?
Blog Talk Radio. But if you go to my website, there's information out there.
Okay.
This has been
What day is it
Community
on?
Forum.
Tuesday.
My name is Dr. Waddell Brooks Sr., your host.